ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your great interest in this topic. It's a pleasure to see you all here, especially because I'm a lawyer. I'm standing on the other side in general, but I'm not, I have to say. I'm only working as a researcher. I'm doing research in the area of cybercrime, and I'm defending as well, so I'm on your side. It's still a little bit difficult for me to speak to you because you have all this technical knowledge that I don't have. So I can only give you some basic information. Some basic information that could be interesting for you the next 2 days or next 3 days you're here. Because the question, is hacking a crime or not, if you're acting in Germany, is quite an interesting question for you. I will get through a few details with you. I would like to talk to you about the situation in Germany as an example right now, and I would like to give you an view how the international development in this area is. So what are we expecting within the international harmonization in this area? If there are any questions from your side, just feel free to ask me anytime. You can just simply interrupt me. There's a heavy light in front of me. I don't see very much, but just stand up and say I have a question. I'm not a technical expert, as I mentioned before, so if it really gets into technique, I'll try my best, but maybe I will simply ask someone of you to give me a hand. Yeah, one more thing, that's the last thing, as an introduction. I would like to have this, to get this done a little bit like a dialogue, not really a monologue. I'm not only here to give you some information, but take something home with me. I will give you my email address at the end, because the terrible thing that is happening with regard to cybercrime right now is that there is quite a number of legislative activities, but people doing that who do not really know the topic very much. So we have to get in some kind of dialogue with you and other experts, interest groups, to really solve these problems. I can't do it on my own, you can't do it on your own, but I would like you really to hear your point of view, hear your worries with regard to the legislation in this area. There will be an additional lecture this evening about data retention, what comes next. That would be very interesting for me to hear your point of view in this area as well. But let's get started with the question, is hacking a crime? Well, if you talk to people in the legislation who are in power right now, and I'm not going to mention any names, they still know hacking very well, or they seem to know hacking very well, because they always mention, oh, I watched a number of movies in the 80s and I really know what hacking is about and it's a difficult situation. De facto, there is not much going on in this area, not much legislation and not much investigation from the police. They're concentrating on other crimes. For example, child pornography or phishing. I mean, for me, phishing has quite a lot to do with hacking, but maybe not for you. But you know, this is what the investigation authorities are concentrating on. There are a number of small units that are investigating hacking, but hacking is happening on a large scale, especially the next 3 days here in Berlin. And there are just very, very few experts who would be able to prosecute you because they have the technical knowledge. But there was in the 80s really an intensive discussion about the question, shall we have criminal liability for hacking? And today, these discussions are very easy. If you're asking, shall we have criminal liability for dissemination of child pornography on the internet, there is not really discussion. It's just done. We will have the law. And we have in other areas as well. But in the past, in the 80s, there was really an intensive discussion. And there must have been some of you hackers in the legislation, because the government decided, no, it shouldn't really be a crime at that moment. I will give you some more closer information about this in a minute. But at least there was a discussion. Today we don't have discussion anymore, so I would like to have some kind of discussion with you about this aspect. Well, in general, legislation with regard to cybercrime is difficult. People who really don't know the details, the technical details, they are just experts in the law area, and they're not especially in cybercrime, but in law in general, and they are drafting laws that are not really useful. I have one example for you. It's in German. It's just pasted it from one of the news boards. This is quite an important interest group in Germany that mentioned at the beginning of this year that there should be a special regulation with regard to phishing. There should be some criminal provision in our penal law because it is not a crime yet. So what they basically wanted to have is something where they can prosecute phishing attacks. But that is absolutely useless because we have something like this in our penal law. It's just that these experts don't know it and that they don't know the technique. So therefore they don't know how to apply the law. And this is a situation I'm not too happy about. And if there's a chance for you, for Chaos Computer Club, or forever, to get influence in this area and really try to negotiate with these people and explain them where are the difficulties, what is the technique like, it might be possible for them to identify the provisions in the existing criminal law and apply them. So this was just a bad example for what is happening right now. There are a number of other examples that I will pick out a little later. Well, I don't want to say we don't need criminal provisions in the area of cybercrime. We definitely need them, that's no question. And I'm not here to say anything else. It's very important. It is important because the internet offers a number of advantages for people who are willing to commit crimes. So therefore, we've seen a certain tendency that people are using the internet to commit crimes, and we really have to deal with this. We have to enable the investigation authorities to deal with this problem. But we need to balance. It is impossible, or it should not be, that's my point of view, it should not be that we are prosecuting things in the internet that we will not prosecute in the real world. So there should be a balance between prosecution and criminal liability in the real world and prosecution and criminal liability in the internet. If you're exchanging pornographic writings, I mean real books, child pornography, in the real world, you will be prosecuted. If you exchange child pornography images in the internet, you will be prosecuted as well. That's pretty much the same. But right now we see certain tendencies that because the legislation, the government is feeling unable to handle the internet, to get some kind of control mechanism to control it, because it is nearly impossible to control it, because we see this development, we see that the legislation is trying to more and more regulate the internet. And this is a tendency which we should really watch very carefully, and where we should try to keep a hand on and say, no, we shouldn't do that. This is a little bit too much. Hacking is something in between. Hacking can be a crime and, of course, a criminal act. If you're getting into a system, stealing data and selling them to somebody, that is definitely a crime. That's no question. And does everybody agree? Or was it a no? Okay. I was not sure. Yes, please. Oh, wonderful. That's an absolutely perfect question. I'm sorry. I'm a lawyer, so excuse that. Hacking, yeah, there is a definition I will use in the future, is access to a computer system, but of course there will be an argument for you why it can't be. It's a little bit difficult. We have to meet at one point, technical point in your experience and my very poor experience and the legal basis. But hacking for me is access, and so far illegal access, and I cannot steal data. I can copy data. That's for sure. But there's another question.
We tend to use the word cracker for those who use their hacking ability for criminal things.
Okay, so we are talking about crackers. Good. Okay, you're the hackers, you're the good guys, and the crackers are those who are... I will try to explain to you later on why it is very difficult to keep them out, so why it is difficult to divide between them, but mention it again if I talk about the bad hackers. Okay, so there is definitely a legislation needed in this area, but we have to keep a certain balance. Okay, let's start hacking in Germany. I mean, you're all acting in Germany. I don't know how many of you are Germans, how many of you come from other countries. If you're starting hacking attacks in Germany, you're under German law, and you can, of course, be prosecuted. So it will be very interesting to hear what are you allowed and what are you not allowed to do. This is how I start, especially because it makes it easier to explain to you the international influence we'll see in a few minutes. Okay, German penal law is applicable in Berlin, and especially in this conference center. There was a news I read a year ago. I've never been to one of these conferences here before, but I read a news last year, end of last year. It was a report about this conference, and it basically says something like, well, like in every year, hacking attacks were done, or cracking maybe, we have to say, I'm not quite sure, but some pages were accessed and some information were changed, altered. So we were here, or this page was hacked, just to show your ability. It wasn't only one page or two page. This article said something like 18,000 pages changed within this 3-day conference. So this was the news. And then they were quite surprised to hear that police read this and started investigation. Well, we'll see in a minute whether this is a crime or not, whether you're allowed to access a web page by circumventing any kind of protection and then changing data. This is hacking? Would you say this is hacking or is it cracking? Okay, good. Because that is really the difficult field we are talking. We are not talking about these cases where it is absolutely certain that this is hacking, if you're really getting access to the FBI computer and take some information there. This is something we don't have to talk about. We have to talk about this, what is happening here, these things you're just doing every day and you're doing for fun. Okay, hacking is, oh, well, no, it's a little bit difficult to say. Let us get through the procedure. When this law was drafted, and well, 50 years ago, we had not had any regulation in the national penal law dealing with hacking. In the 1980s, there was a discussion that we need something like this. This was the first hacker movies were there, and they said, oh, we're very afraid of that, what could happen, so therefore we need a regulation. But the legislation was quite clever. They said, no, we do not, for some reason, unlike other countries, they said in Germany, hacking should not be a criminal act. Accessing a computer should not be a criminal act. That should be legal, cannot be prosecuted under criminal law. But if you take data out, or if you delete something or change something, that should be a crime. So simply getting into it is no crime right now. It's a little bit difficult. Section 202A was implemented in the national law, and it says, whoever without authorization obtains data for himself or another person can be prosecuted under German law. So they said this is enough. Hacking should not be a criminal act. But you know, the hacker and especially the expert said, well, if I'm hacking a system, if I'm getting into it, I would like to know, am I in or not? So I definitely want to see some kind of information. I want to see the first page or whatever. So if I'm in, there are some data sent to me, so then I obtain these data. So am I a criminal then or not? And the legislation was quite strict in this area. In the explanatory report, or the explanation about this law, they said, no, that should not be a criminal act. So the first information, the first page, these information, you obtain them definitely, but we have some kind of restrict interpretation of this provision which says if it is only the first page, it's fine. If you're obtaining the password, that's the first step. If you for some reason, for example, social engineering, if you're getting in possession of a password, this is not 202A, definitely not. So this is all out. So if you're really just entering a page, say, I did it, I'm fine, I leave now, that's it. That's no criminal act right now, in most of the cases, in 99.9% of the cases. The difficulty comes in the next step. The difficulty comes with these pages. If you say, yeah, I was here, or this site has been changed, if you add something or delete something or whatever, because the alteration of data is definitely a crime under section 303A. Whether you're circumventing any protection or not, if you're entering a page and changing data without authorization, you're definitely committing a crime. So therefore, this news was not very clever. I mean, I don't want to say you should do that or you should not do it, but if you do it, you should not really report about it. Let's get through it. We divide in our German national law between protected systems and unprotected systems. I mean, if I say protected system, password protected, you might simply laugh and say that's not protection. But that's about the kind of protection we are talking about. If there is an unprotected system, a system really that is open wide, there is no kind of access control on this side, not even a very bad access control, you're allowed to access the system, that's for sure. For example, a web page without password protection. Of course, you're able and you're allowed to read them. You're as well as allowed to obtain data because the legislation, our law, does only say you're not allowed to obtain this information if they are well protected. So unprotected information are free information. That means if somebody says, I do not want anybody to read them, and I want